Tonight on KQED Newsroom, California responds to a leaked draft Supreme Court decision that seeks to overturn Roe v. Wade. We hear from Congressmember Jackie Speier, Planned Parenthood of California's CEO Jody Hicks, and Santa Clara University law professor Margaret Russell. Plus, wife and husband Anna Malaika and Michael Tubbs are activists and authors. They join us to discuss their new books, highlighting the power of mothers. Plus, as spring brings a harvest of fruits and vegetables, we visit outdoor farmers markets in this week's Something Beautiful. Coming to you from KQED headquarters in San Francisco, this Friday, May 6th, 2022. Hello and welcome to the show. This is KQED Newsroom and I'm Priya David Clemens. This week, many of us were stunned to learn that the Supreme Court intends to reverse Roe v. Wade, the 1973 ruling that protects a woman's right to have an abortion. The information came by way of a leaked draft Supreme Court opinion obtained by the news organization Politico. In response, the state of California and many of our healthcare agencies are signaling they will expand access to abortion services for women who may travel here from other states. Lawmakers are also talking about hardening state laws to protect the right to have an abortion in California. Joining us now is Congressmember Jackie Speier. Congressmember, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for the invitation, Priya.
So could you describe your reaction when you heard about the draft ruling?
You know, it was a gut punch. I was stunned. I was literally sipping a Negroni at the time, and I thought, I need another one. I couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it. And I think most of us who have toiled in the fields of women's equality and reproductive rights, it's like a bad dream. There's a nightmarish element to it because it suggests that we are really going back in time. Now, you know, lots has happened since the back alley abortions of yesteryear, and that's not anything that we should contemplate. There's medication abortion now, there's many technological advances, but it does place women in a position of being more chattel than human beings. I mean, we're being told by the government that we are going to have to carry a fetus to term.
In 2011, you became the first member of Congress to share a personal abortion story on the House floor. Why did you think it was important to speak publicly about that?
I really had no intention of speaking publicly about it, but there was this rage that welled up inside of me when a colleague on the other side of the aisle was reading from a book talking about second trimester abortions and talking about sawing off limbs. And I couldn't take it. I stood up and said, you know, I've had this procedure, and how dare you talk about something you know nothing about? And there is oftentimes an effort to paint women as using abortions as a form of a contraception, which couldn't be further from the truth. Any woman who has an abortion, whether her life is at risk or it is a profoundly inappropriate time to have a child, it is a struggle. It is a personal struggle to deal with it. And it's important to point out that 25% of women in this country, before they reach the age of 45, will have an abortion. And 59% of the women who have abortions are mothers. Mm-hmm. They have embraced motherhood. This is not about not wanting to have children. It's about either a personal risk, a physical risk, or a financial inopportune point in time. And why would we want to bring children in the world that we're not going to be able to properly care for?
Could you tell us, share with us, insofar as you're comfortable, about the difference being able to end your pregnancy made in your life?
It allowed me to continue in public service. It allowed me to subsequently have a second child. This was a pregnancy that I desperately wanted, but the fetus had fallen from the uterus through the cervix into the vagina. And, I was kept overnight upside down in a hospital bed trying to get the fetus to return to the uterus. And it didn't happen. And it was not going to be viable. And so I made the decision to have an abortion. Every time a woman miscarries, she's having an abortion. And for people to suggest that physicians shouldn't be trained in how to perform abortions is placing women at risk, because women do have miscarriages. I've had two.
And that's often not talked about as well. There is often sort of this culture of quiet around these things that happen in women's lives. And it's understandable also because there's often a lot of pain and personal hardship that's associated with these times of life. I'd like to turn to politics in this final question that we have together. The latest polling shows that Americans oppose overturning Roe. What do you think the impact of this ruling will be in terms of motivating the Democratic base for the midterm elections or motivating the Republican base?
I think it's going to motivate women of every affiliation, women who are Democrats, women who are Republicans, and women who are independents, and those around them that are supportive of them. It's expected that this particular midterm election is all about the suburban woman, whether she's Republican, Democrat, or independent. And I would suggest to you, suburban women are going to find this so offensive. And it's frightening, because it really is about taking away rights that women have had for half a century. And it borders on diabolical.
There have been predictions that the Republicans will win enough seats to take control of the House and the Senate in the midterm elections. If that happens, do you think there will be a legislative push to ban abortions nationwide?
I don't think there's any need to wait to the November elections take place. There's already major efforts around the country to ban abortions, to criminalize women who have abortion, to prevent women from traveling out of state to have an abortion. So I think the frothing at the mouth that's going on by colleagues on the other side of the aisle is going to be very destructive to the Republican Party, because they are, I think, overreaching once again.
Congressmember Jackie Speier, you are nearing the end of your time in Congress, and we're looking forward to having you come in and sit down with us and reflect on your career overall in the months ahead.
I look forward to doing it, Priya.
Thank you. The draft opinion raises a host of legal questions and serious concerns about access to abortion for millions of women across the country. Women of color are most likely to be affected if Roe is overturned. Joining us to discuss these issues are Professor of Constitutional Law at Santa Clara University, Margaret Russell, and CEO and President of Planned Parenthood California, Jody Hicks. Ladies, thank you both for being here with me today. I appreciate it. So Jody, this news, it came through a leak, but it wasn't a surprise to many who are watching this issue across the nation. The state of California has actually been preparing for this potential ruling for many months now. Can you tell us what the state has been doing?
That's right. So when Texas passed their restrictive abortion ban back in September, and this Supreme Court let it go into effect, which that was a surprise at that time, we quickly pulled together experts and knew we were seeing patients immediately that were coming from Texas. I also want to be clear, we have been seeing patients from all around the country before that. So last fiscal year, we saw some 7,000 patients, patient services from all around the country because of a host of barriers that are already in existence. So when that went into effect, we pulled experts together, including policymakers, and created the Future of Abortion Council. And within a 3-month time frame, had 45 recommendations. Before the lawmakers came back in January, they've introduced over a dozen bills and budget proposals. So we've been preparing for this day.
You said 7,000 in the last fiscal year. Are there any predictions for how many could be coming?
You know, it's difficult to accurately predict because of all the variables. I'll give you just quickly, when Texas went into effect, Oklahoma City had the bulk of those patients. Their wait time went from about 3 days to about 3 weeks. About half the patients they're seeing are from Texas, and now they have just signed into law their ban that will go into effect when when Roe v. Wade's decision is final. So it's a domino effect. We do know that what the reports are saying is there's some 1.4 million extra patients that will find California as their closest health center, and so we're just preparing for that capacity and really ensuring that for half the country, women are going to have to travel outside of the state they live in to get services. And so how can we ensure that we are a haven state to help people get here?
Margaret, you're a university professor, and you've been talking with young women over this past week and many weeks. What are you hearing from them?
It's been an extremely difficult couple of days. I've spoken with a lot of students, male and female, but particularly the female students who have grown up with an understanding of their rights under Roe and they're afraid, they're demoralized. They are trying very hard not to be cynical about what appears to be a very politicized decision of the court.
And do you see, from your perspective as a constitutional law professor, that this draft ruling is really what you expect to have happen when the official ruling comes out? Or is there any opportunity here in the coming months for public pressure or any other sort of legislative work to change what may come from the Supreme Court?
This is a draft opinion. I don't think that any outside pressure will make any difference, and proudly so, as the way that the Supreme Court works. I don't expect the result to be any different. What did surprise me about the draft, in which what may be negotiated and tempered a little bit, is what I really see as there is a callousness and a breadth and scope to the decision that will affect other rights that we've understood as being liberty interests.
Tell us more about that. What does that mean? What are you worried about?
Yes, so this draft does not just say Roe was wrongly decided. It says it was egregiously wrong, the reasoning is weak, and then it goes on to really give a radical refutation of the right to privacy in constitutional law that has existed since the 1960s in the first right to contraception case. So by attacking this notion of a right to privacy and liberty and saying that's not in the Constitution, it opens the door to a lot of other things that are not literally in the Constitution, but are understood as liberty and equality interests.
Would you enumerate some of those?
Yes, so most recently the Obergefell decision that held that there is a fundamental right to marry that cannot be denied to same-sex couples. There will be, and were, dissenters who argued that that was a made-up right, that should be up to the people, that should be up to the state legislatures to decide whether or not to accord that right. There are many other long understood rights that are not literally in the Constitution, like an indigent's right to counsel, for example, in a criminal proceeding. Excuse me, a right to privacy in your sexual decisions and your bodily autonomy. And so all of those come into play.
We've certainly seen, in terms of who generally needs these reproductive care services, it often is women who are low income, often women of color. Jody, would you talk to us a little bit about who's going to be most impacted by this ruling?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, we're already hearing stories of people in Texas that have never traveled outside of the state they live in. So they've never traveled outside of Texas, and now they have to navigate how a public health system that's hostile to their needs, and how to travel, where to go, all of those variables, and it always disproportionately harms. And that's always been true. People with resources can get access to care, and people that don't have those resources have the biggest barriers. And so that is one of the challenges. It's what we're doing, putting a lot of investments in right now in California, is how we can ensure that some of those organizations that help with that are invested in enough to do that work.
So are we talking about, travel vouchers, helping people who come here with hotel costs, with the cost of services themselves?
Yes, so the good news is there are abortion funds all over the country that have been doing this work. Even in California, it's hard. There's sometimes a 20-25 minute travel time to get to the nearest health center. And so there are organizations that have been doing this work, including some of the Planned Parenthood health centers. And so investing in them, making sure that they have the resources they need to be able to help patients right now as they need that work. There's partnerships that are happening with companies as well that can help do some of that work. And then one of the big things California is trying to do is really have a centralized landing page for all of that information. So if you imagine somebody just trying to know they need to get to California, what that means. And then we're hiring up patient and abortion navigators where their sole job is to help somebody know what airport to come into, how to get to the health centers. All of that work is being done right now.
Okay. And in the last 30 seconds we have here, Margaret, what do you expect to see out of the Supreme Court next? What are you going to be watching for?
Well, they have an investigation as far as the leak goes, but I think much more important is the substance. So there will be a decision by the end of June. I think that it will almost certainly be overruling Roe versus Wade. And that is a lot more dangerous than people think because it means the criminalization of behavior that has been understood to be a constitutional right.
Margaret, Jody, thank you for being here with us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
The decision to give birth or not is complex, with considerations of family, work, finances, health, independence, and more. Becoming a mother means taking on many new roles and responsibilities in order to nurture and raise the next generation. Motherhood has often been undervalued, and multitudes of mothers' voices, stories, and contributions have been lost to history. Our next guests want to raise the profiles of mothers. Malaika Tubbs' New York Times best-selling book is The Three Mothers: How the Mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin Shaped a Nation. Her husband, Michael Tubbs, is an advocate for ending poverty, and he's also the former mayor of Stockton. His book, The Deeper the Roots, a memoir of hope and home, also highlights the power of the three women who raised him. Dr. Malaika Tubbs and Michael Tubbs join us now. Anna and Michael, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
I appreciate it. So let's start by getting your reactions to the news that Roe v. Wade is very likely to be overturned. Anna, let me start with you.
Yeah, I would say I'm not surprised. I think we saw this coming for several months, but it doesn't make it any less disgusting, any less awful, especially in a nation that does not support mothers. We don't have affordable leave. Affordable child care. We don't have parental leave afforded to everybody. We are a nation that does not support mothers, and therefore to force women to become mothers is an absolute crime. We need to make sure that we, by every cost and every measure at a state level, local level, support and protect women's rights if our country is not going to do it.
Michael.
Yeah, I think of my own mother and the fact that she had me as a 16-year-old, and I think she was prepared for the sacrifices and the difficulty of becoming a mother because she had a choice. She wasn't forced to bring me to term, but she said and thought about it and thought about could she do it. And I think that level of autonomy and choice is incredibly important, particularly as Anna mentioned, in a country where mothers have to do so much because we don't have the social safety net and we don't have the supports, we don't have the things that make parenting and motherhood at least a little easier. So it's a very dark day for our country, and I think it's a real wake-up call. But we've seen an assault, not just on women's right to choose, but on all progressive gains of the past century, in the past couple of years, and it's going to continue unless we do something about it.
Well, let's turn a little bit to your work, which is about highlighting and bringing up the profiles of women and of mothers in particular. Anna, this was your doctoral dissertation that you turned into your debut book, which has done extremely well, and it's a fascinating read. Tell me a little bit about how you chose this subject of mothers and the mothers of these particular three people.
Yeah, first and foremost, I have to say I had an incredible mother who was a lawyer that advocated for women's rights, both in the U.S. as well as abroad. And so when I started my PhD, I wanted to do something that honored mothers, and I also wanted to find other hidden figures. I was inspired by Margot Lee Shetterly's work that went on to become this incredible valuable film, and I was going to be someone who corrected this erasure of Black women's stories. I narrowed it down to these 3 mothers in particular because, one, they were all born within 6 years of each other, Alberta King, Bertus Baldwin, and Louise Little. And then their famous sons were all born within 5 years of each other. So I could bring their stories together, celebrate Black womanhood, bring a large audience to the table to talk about Black American history, Black women's history through their eyes over a century of our world history. So, yeah.
And let me just stay with you for a moment. What should we know? What should we learn? It's a full book. You can't get into everything. But if there's something you'd like to share with our audience.
I'll just give little teasers for those who haven't read the book about one thing with each woman that we should have known that'll allow us to kind of feel that sense of shock that I felt doing this research. The book was 90% my original research, so this was not information that was available to us before. If you tried to search these women, you would come up very short on finding anything about them. First, with Alberta Williams King, MLK Jr.'s mother, we knew in our history that MLK Sr., of course, was a pastor, and we all assumed that this is kind of where he inherited all of his gifts from, that MLK Jr. inherited it from his father. But in fact, it was actually Alberta's parents who established Ebenezer Baptist Church, who raised her to believe that Christian faith was always intertwined with social justice. She participated in marches and in boycotts. And in fact, when she got married, her husband moved in with her. This was a family of influence. We should all know that. That's a part of our American history, our world history. With Bertus Baldwin, James Baldwin's mother, she was a writer herself. She believed that you could change other people's perspectives on what was happening in the world through the power of words. And so she would gift letters to her loved ones, showing them the way to the light, to finding love, to finding healing, even in the darkest of times. And that is very much what James Baldwin did for the entire world. And then thinking about Malcolm X and his mother, Louise Little. She was a radical activist, a proud Garveyite, a Black nationalist. Long before her children were even a thought in her mind, she was writing for the Negro World newspaper, putting her name in writing, saying, "I will stand up for myself and for my people by any means necessary." This was Louise Little, and this is also what we celebrate and love Malcolm X for. We should have known long before my book that they were following in their mother's footsteps.
Let's turn to your book now, Michael, which also celebrates 3 mothers from a very personal point of view. This is your own 3 mothers, your birth mother, your aunt, and your grandmother. Tell us about their influence in your life and how they shaped you.
Yeah, I appreciate sort of my mom, my aunts, and my grandmother more and more as I get older, because I realize they are so regular, so ordinary, and just like people you meet at the grocery store, people you meet at church, but really instill strong values. They always taught myself and my cousins and my brother that we weren't better than people, but no one was better than us. They were very clear from early on that I was worth fighting for. So every time I got kicked out of class, every time I thought someone was treating me unfairly, whether it was a basketball coach or a teacher, they would take off work and be in the classroom, sit down with me, meet with every time, even when I was wrong. And that taught me early on, like, wow, I'm worth fighting for. They also taught me about service. Like, I didn't know there was a name for it. I remember actually being hungry and having to pass out food, and then we would eat after. Or going to the convalescent hospital every month with my grandmother to talk to the folks who were in there, and realizing that without giving any lectures, without giving any speeches, they were teaching me what it meant to be a good person and what it meant to be a leader, and that's to serve.
And in the last couple of years, 3 years, you 2 have become parents yourself.
Yes.
Twice.
You have 2 children, a boy and a girl, right? A girl and
Yes.
a boy. Tell us about how, becoming parents yourselves has informed your thoughts about motherhood in this last minute that we have left here together.
Yeah, well, I was writing the book when we found ourselves expecting our first, and I was so well aware, of course, of the Black maternal health crisis, so aware of how difficult and dangerous it could be to become a Black mother in the United States. And so at first, my experience of it was one that had a lot of fear because of my knowledge. But in studying these 3 women, actually, it gave me such a warm welcome into motherhood. Michael,
I'll give you the last word here.
It's hard. No, in all seriousness, I think that as a former government, like I remember when our son was born, I was still mayor. It hit me that the job of government is to allow parents to parent. that so many of the things we have issues with and some of the social issues we're trying to solve are because we don't give parents what they need to be good parents or effective parents, from health care to affordable child care to a universal basic income. So now more clear, I should say, than ever, that the function of government, at the very least, should be to allow parents to parent and give parents what they need, particularly mothers, what they need to raise their children.
Yeah. Michael and Anna, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.
Apples, asparagus, apricots, and more are in season this spring. A rainbow of produce, which is this week's Something Beautiful. Farmers markets in Alameda and Berkeley brighten the streets as locals peruse booths bursting with delicious regional flavors. I have not been to a farmer's market in far too long. That is inspiring me to check it out. This weekend, I am going. That's the end of our show for tonight. You can find KQED Newsroom online or on Twitter, or email us at knr@kqed.org. You can always reach me on social media at Priya D. Clemens. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you right back here next Friday night. Have a happy Mother's Day and a great weekend.